At the gas station across the road where the company had an account, a white gas man sauntered over. With a head bob and a grin, he started to fill up. While pretending to wash the windshield, he stared through it instead, sizing me up, leaving water streaks across the glass. It was the 70s, and civil rights gains hadn't sunk in much in the small town South. So I had to ask myself, what was a Black New Yorker like me doing in that foreign land of rifle racks and pickup trucks, waving Confederate flags, and a local university that didn't let Blacks set foot on campus? I'd moved there with my husband, despite my father's warning that I didn't understand the ways of the South. The South his family had escaped during the Great Migration. But I was a love-struck bride, so I went with my husband anyway, thinking his better job was our step up. The gas man replaced the nozzle and came around to the driver's side. As I started the engine, he stuck his head too close to my open window. "You've been coming in here regular, gal," he said, his stale smoker's breath so strong I turned my head a moment. "I've been looking at you and wondering, what are you anyway? You Spanish?" "No." I refused to meet his eyes. "Italian, right? You're Italian." "Nope." I hated it when people started this guessing game about which box my looks fit in. "Injun?" "No." "You ain't a Jew, is you?" "No." "Then tell me what? What?" "Black," I said loudly to the windshield. "I'm black." He whooped and jumped back from the car, then cupped his hands and yelled across the pumps to another attendant. "Hey, Joe, come here and look at this gal. She says she's black." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a middle-aged white woman in an old Chevy at the next pump. She turned, craning to see who he was talking about. "Get on out of that car so I can take a look at you," he said, talking in a tone I thought he saved just for Blacks, demanding and superior, as though I had to obey him. He reached for the driver's door handle to open it. I jerked my head around and faced him. "You better step the hell out of my way if you don't want your foot run over." I stomped on the gas and fled the station. But I couldn't flee the nerve he struck. I had pulled up and out from my childhood ghetto, where we lived in a flat with a coal-burning stove and a ceiling that fell in on Christmas, cringing from my Black father when he raged and drank over the racists on a job where he wasn't paid right. I graduated from a Black university and joined a Black church, married a Black man, and still people challenged me, tried to place me outside of who I knew I was, because I have light skin. Blackness was my essence. I reveled in it, loved jive talk, diligently object to racism, from store clerks following my husband on suspicion of stealing to corporate foot dragging on hiring Blacks. With Black people, my people, I could be myself, safe from harassment or having to filter myself for white people's benefit. There in that South Carolina gas station, I was Black, according to my family, society's one-drop rule, and my government-issued birth certificate. It was culturally and legally ridiculous to wonder if I wasn't, because the biological fact of my birth was completely beside the point, counted for nothing. My beloved mother is white.
Oh, that's really a great passage. And everyone, if you haven't read the book, please be sure to do so, because it's really a great book. So right now,
I just want to show the cover of the book. Say I'm Dead, a family secret, a family memoir of race, secrets, and love. It's available, I know, at your library and also on Amazon.
Yeah, so please be sure to come by the library and get a copy, or buy one from Amazon like I did. I regret that this is not an in-person event where I could have Dolores sign books for us, but maybe in the future, who knows what, we'll start having in-person events again. Well, now we've got some questions I would like to ask you. And the first one is, your father was Black, your mother was white. You had one brother who identified as Black and militant, and another who married white and lived on the white side of town. You grew up Black, but became the one who needed to know what being half white meant. What were the family dynamics with such divergency?
You know, my family was all over the map. Black father from Georgia, white mother from Indiana. My brother David wore dashikis and had an afro the size of a pumpkin, became the Juneteenth festival chairperson. And my oldest brother, we suspected, passed for white. Although he came around, we saw him, but we didn't go over there much. It's interesting because there's so many ways to be interracial. But in our house, when we were raised, and in my own house, we've always been Black. We've always been Black. And as that passage shows that, you know, if you have a Black parent or a Chinese parent or a African parent or whoever have you, and a white parent, you're still the minority. That's America's understanding because of the one drop rule. And that's how our household ran. We didn't make an issue out of race, but other people did. Other people brought it to our door. And my mother was really a very different kind of person because she said racism was foolishness. That when she met my father, she found that all the things she had heard about Black people was not true. That Black people were lazy and shiftless and violent and all of these things. She said, your father was so well groomed and intelligent and personable, and I just couldn't imagine why people said those things. And as she lived in the ghetto among Black people all of her days, you know, she had so many friends, and she was so loved by her friends, her Black friends, that that was the center of our life, being Black.
Because actually, some of my favorite passages in the book is during the, I'll say, the courtship period of your mother and father. They were, you know, very. I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
Well, and which brings me to, how did it happen that your white mother took up with and married a Black man in 1943, when the Klan was running their city government in Indianapolis, and it was against the law for them to marry there?
Yeah, that's really the central point of this book. So in 1943, they met on the job. She was the mail clerk and he was the handyman that was sent down to build a shelf so they could put the packages and stuff on it. And at that time, as you said, the Klan, openly affiliated members of the Klan were running the city council. It was against the law in the state of Indiana for Black and white to marry, punishable by 7 years in prison by both the man and the woman. And in addition, my father saw in the Black barbershop a picture postcard of the lynching that had taken place outside of Indianapolis. 2 Black men had been accused of a robbery, and a white woman said she had been raped. They were arrested, and a white mob went to the jail and busted through there with sledgehammers, took those 2 men and strung them up in a tree. Thing was, and maybe this audience is familiar with this fact, there were photographers, professional photographers that would go out to the scene of a lynching and take a picture, turn it into a postcard and sell it like a souvenir to white people. It was hanging up in the Black barbershop, which was a warning to the customers. Be very careful here. This is Klan country. They are the law here. Well, my father and mother dated in secret. Nobody ever knew that they had been together. And when they got ready to get married, and they wanted to get married, my father had to really explain it to my mother. She was not aware of the lynching. She had always understood, according to newspaper articles and conversation in her white world, that the Klan were good guys. They were giving out wheelchairs to grandma and free food to white people, and they were presenting themselves as somebody that they weren't. And when he told her that they would kill Black people out of hate, she did not know that. Now, he told her, if you want to be together, we're going to have to leave here, and we're going to have to leave here in secret. Your family cannot know where you are, because the law is going to come after you if they know you're with me, and I'm going to get lynched like those two men out there. So she had to decide whether she would leave her family, which was a loving family, to marry this Black man, and she chose to do that. So my father left Indianapolis and went to Buffalo, where his mother lived. When she came up from Georgia, she settled in Buffalo, New York. And my mother basically staged her own disappearance. She told her parents she was going on vacation to visit a girlfriend from high school that lived in Massachusetts. And her father wasn't in favor of her taking this trip because it wasn't good for a young lady to go unescorted. But she convinced him that it was going to be fine and she'd be back soon. They put her on the train and they never saw her again. When she didn't come home, her father called the police. They tracked down the girl in Massachusetts who had never heard of any vacation plan. They searched all over Indianapolis to the suspects who might have had any interest in my mother. Turned up nothing. She had gone through New York City and then had to change trains to go to Buffalo. And so she sent them a postcard from New York City. So then they decided to search New York, and the FBI got involved because she had traveled across several states on that train. The FBI searched all that route. And when all the authorities came together, they had not found her. So they called my white grandfather to come to New York, and they closed the case, telling him that she was the victim of foul play. That meant she had either been murdered or was sold into white slavery. And that is what her family lived with for 36 years while she stayed underground with my father.
And that was another amazing moment in the book. I kept feeling like that I was reading a novelized version of a movie. There was just so many fascinating things that kept happening in the book that really keeps the reader going. And so my next question is, what's the difference between the racism you experienced as a Black person and as a mixed race person?
I call it the double whammy because, of course, we all are familiar with racism against Black people, but there's a lot of racism against mixed race people too. And my parents got married 25 years before the Supreme Court overruled all those anti-miscegenation laws throughout American states. When I was 10 years old, my parents had been married 15 years. Pew Research, which is, quite a famous research house in America, did a survey that showed 96% of Americans were against race mixing, Black and white. That meant that when we went out, people would cross the street or get up and move to a different seat on the bus or push their kids away so we wouldn't touch them. They'd spit on the ground. They'd say all kinds of ugly things. We even had a white woman who realized my mother was with my father, and she threw her hand over her mouth and ran away. So we had all of those kinds of experiences growing up as a mixed race family. And, we all know how the police can treat Black people with discrimination. And there was a time when we were little and my father bought our first car. It was a used car. And we were so excited he was going to take us out for a Sunday ride. And he was a welder who made ornamental steel, so big gates on public buildings and stuff like that. Of course, they never at his job titled him as a welder and never paid him what other welders made. But anyway, we take our first ride in the car and we go way out beyond anything I knew about to see a bridge that he had worked on. And while we're looking out the window and he's explaining it, a police car comes and pulls up with the lights flashing. And when they get out and my father rolls down the window and my mother gives him the talk that the Black parents are giving their kids now. She's patting him on the leg and telling him, don't say a word. Please don't say a word. Put your hands where they can see them and don't talk back. So the police officer comes up and he says, well, what do we have here? An N-word and his white woman and 3 little mongrels in the back. My father was a hot-tempered man, and so my mom is constantly whispering to him, telling him, don't say anything, don't say anything. They gave him a speeding ticket. He was going about 10 miles an hour. And then they told him to go back where he came from, take his white trash with him, and don't never be seen over there again. We were little kids. My father was the king of our house, and they just emasculated him in front of us. He was so mad. When we turned around and went back over the bridge to go home, they stood out there glaring at us beside the squad car. And my mother was saying, you did the right thing, you did the right thing. They could, if you got out of the car, they would have beat you up, they would have taken you to jail. God knows what would have happened to you. So mixed race and Black race, they were 2 different kinds of racism that we experienced.
That is such a shame, but I'm also thinking about when.
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you, Ronald.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that was just such a horrible thing that happened, and you know, it made me think about when your parents went to that first family party and how they treated your mother.
Yes, I will tell you about that if you like. And I see somebody's waiting to get from the waiting room.
Thank you.
So my mom went to Buffalo. She met my dad there. The president of NAACP married them in his living room. And shortly after she arrived, there was a birthday party in the family. So my mom wanted to go. You know, she had been in hiding and, you know, telling these stories to her family and everything. She wanted to go and have some fun. And my father and grandmother were saying, oh, you don't want to go. You're not gonna have any fun over there. And she just kept on, so they went. And when she arrived, of course, she was the only white person. Nobody in the family had ever had any white person in their house. And people were just staring and commenting out loud and everything. What is she doing here? Well, my dad had been married before, and his ex-wife was there. She started insulting my mother. My great uncle had apparently been very against my father coming there with her. And he started in. And it was nearly a fist fight. The family split, turned over the table with the food on it, the whole thing. And for many years, there were quite a few members of my father's family that never called us, invited us, included us. We were on the outside. And it was only when I started researching for this book and I went back and interviewed some family relatives. There was a lady, Rosalie, it was her birthday party that day. And she and my mom actually came to be good friends. And she was in a nursing home. I went to see her and I asked her, Aunt Rosalie, how come y'all left my mother out of everything? How come so many of the family, you know, she said, you know, your mother is a beautiful lady. I love Ella. But she was a white girl that had run off with a black man in 1943. And we knew the law was coming and there would be guns. We didn't want to be in the middle of that trouble, so we just stayed away. So yes, my mom was very isolated. And my father bore the stress and the burden of not only trying to function as a Black man in a prejudiced world, but standing in front of his family, his white wife and mixed children, against all of the discrimination that came to us.
Well, they were very brave. Try to withstand that. So the backdrop for the journey of generations of your mixed race family story is the changing national perspective on miscegenation. What do you see as the trajectory of mixed race attitudes and laws in America?
Well, you know, we have to start with slavery. The first mixed race people were the product of plantations, white men on plantations, and Black slave women. Let's start with that. And don't think that it comes from anything else. And the proof of that was when I came down to Birmingham, Alabama to visit this great aunt in researching my story to find out all about my history. She told me something I never knew. My great-grandmother had been raped on a plantation. So my grandmother, who helped raise us, was also half white. That's how she put it to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's when I found out there was a plantation rape that we could trace in our family line. And so, you know, these are the old days that I can tell you about personally. When my great-grandmother was 14, like my Aunt Willie in Alabama told me, she was ripe, you know. She was a sharecropper on the same land where our family was slaves. And this is what white men could do to Black women, and nobody was going to do a thing about it. So we come from slavery into Reconstruction and the situation in 1890 when my grandmother was born, into Jim Crow when my father is afraid because he's with this white woman that he's going to be lynched or go to prison. And then you come to my generation in the 50s and 60s where people were spitting at us. And all the while, from the time that the Supreme Court overturned all those laws in 1967, there has been an accelerating amount of race mixing in this country. And I have studied various records from the Census Bureau on trends and other research that show between 2000 and 2010, that 10-year period, they compared two censuses where they identified mixed race for the first time in those reports. They allow people to check off more than one race. In 2000 was the first time that I checked off more than African American in honor of my mother. But anyway, in 2010, when they compared back to 2000, they discovered that the growth rate in births of mixed race children was 3 times as much as the growth rate in single race children.
Oh, wow. That's quite some statistic.
And yes, and you know, the census that we have just done, they predict it's going to show a bigger number than that. They have a forecast that goes all the way out to mid 2100s, where they come up with a prediction of 20% of America will be mixed race. Now that doesn't mean just Black and white, that's everybody marrying everybody. That's a bigger proportion of the population than the Hispanics today.
Yes.
And they also report on the number of mixed race marriages. In 2015, the report was that 1 in 10 marriages in America is mixed race, and that is set to increase. So we start from plantation rapes in slavery to that picture going forward in 2150. That's the difference in how people are choosing partners and raising children over those several hundred years.
Oh, that's really quite fascinating, because I know one thing I've noticed that is that when you see a mixed race couple now, you put them in a group of people who don't know each other, you don't see the stares the way you just used to. I mean, you still see some, but it's not as much as it was in the past.
It isn't. I mean, when I compare, see, I live in a college town, and so do you. When I compare the way people reacted to us in public as a family back in the 50s, say, to what I see today, there's mixed couples of all kinds of mixtures walking by, and nobody is saying anything or staring or giving the dirty looks that they used to. I don't see it. And there's a park nearby where I like to go and walk by a river. And there's a bunch of old people that sit out there, and there's a lot of young people who are jogging and riding bikes and what have you. And you see these mixed race couples go by, and the old people don't even look up. And they got a little swimming pool, you know, with young kids, and you see, you know, Asian women in there and Hispanic children. You see these mixed race Black kids with white mothers and everything, all playing in there together. Nobody is thinking a thing about it. I know that's not true everywhere.
No, that's true. That's true, but that's quite, you know, but that's quite a change from the past.
Yeah, and you know, you just look at your TV and your movies, and now you see Scandal and all these different programs. You got Black women romantically involved with white men, and Black men with white women. You have commercials. They're selling you everything from insurance to Cheerios with mixed race couples. You know, you didn't see that before.
No. They really have gotten a lot of those commercials in the past couple of years, I've noticed. But actually, the first time I saw one, I had to look again, make sure what I was seeing.
The first one that actually happened in the United States that was on big, you know, rotation on TV programs was by Cheerios. In 2013, they had a white woman, a Black man, and a mixed race child. When they showed that commercial, America went crazy. The internet and everywhere, people were just demanding they take it down. They didn't want to look at that. And today, that's 7 years ago, you can't turn on your TV and don't see race mixing.
That's true. You know, there are some very strong women in I Say I'm Dead. Each seemed to go against the tide in her own way. What did they do and what drove them?
Well, you know, there was my grandmother. After I discovered that she was half white, I went and asked her about it. And she felt that it was up to her to say who she was and not have somebody else tell her who she was. Name her, as we say. Don't call me out of my name. I'll tell you what my name is. And so she wanted to be Black. And, you know, of course, being born in 1890 in Georgia, that was ingrained in her. But she never carried a burden about being the product of a rape of a white man. I felt that was very strong. It was very strong. She was sure who she was. And I asked her one time, did you know your daddy? She said, yeah. He would come around every once in a blue moon with a little bag of candy and sit me on his lap. But I knew the minute he stepped off that porch, I wasn't supposed to know his name. No, he wasn't my daddy. That's what she would say. What kind of daddy would that be? And then I felt my mother was very strong. Look what she did. She gave up everything for the love of a Black man. And she refused to engage in any kind of racism. She loved everybody, and people loved her back. Then, you know, when I decided that I realized that there was a secret where my mother and father hadn't told me. I was in my 30s when I found out what they had done. They had kept that all this time because my father was afraid the law was going to still come after him 36 years afterwards. I thought my mother was extremely strong, but then in a way I was too, because I told her I wanted to know who the white people were, whose blood was running in my veins. And so I went back to Indianapolis to find them. And my mother didn't want me to do that, but I felt like I needed to know. Everybody wants to know where they came from and who they are. And that was defying a lot of social norms. You know, a Black person just showing up and saying, I'm your relative. So yes, there were a lot of strong women in my family.
Well, I must say that portion of the book where you were explaining how your mother felt about you wanting to go out and seek the white family, her portion of the family, I think the reader will feel how strongly your mother felt about that. You did a really good job of conveying that.
Yes, well, you know, I had a long talk with my whole family about this. After I had done my father's family, I put it all on a piece of paper, a genealogy chart, and that's when it dawned on me, like, look at this, all these people here, and there's only one white person. Something is wrong with this. My mother had to come from someone, somewhere. And when I went home and talked to them about it, and I said, you know, our white family is missing. We don't know anything about our white people. My mother was so upset because they had buried that 36-year-old secret and she didn't want to talk about it. But, you know, I convinced her that I had to find out for myself who these people were. And she said, I can't face them after what I did. They think I'm dead. They think for 36 years they've lived with that. And they don't even know you exist. So just leave me out of this. Just leave me out of it. But if you feel like you have to do this for yourself, I understand what you're saying. And I said, well, if I go out there and I find them, what am I supposed to say about you? She said, say I'm dead. And that's what I named the book, because I wanted to show the price people had to pay to cross the race line for love in those days, as opposed to today.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's really quite some story. Now, some of the people in Say I'm Dead accuse you of having light skin privilege. Do you agree? And what role does colorism play in racism?
Well, colorism is extremely prevalent, not only in the United States, but in every society of color. It's shocking to know that Miss Ghana bleached her skin so she looked white. How much bleaching cream is sold in India and Brazil and Cuba and everywhere? People trying to get some light skin privilege because white people who have dominated darker people held themselves up as beauty, as intelligence, as superior in every way. And some folk of color think that if they can get a little closer looking to white, it's going to get them somewhere in life. And I'm not going to say I didn't get privilege from my coloring. I used to work in a corporation and there were these Black guys and we used to go out after work and talk, about how we were treated and what was going on and everything. And I got a promotion and a raise and they told me I got it because I was light. And I was mad with them. But they said to me, you look more like these white managers' daughters. You talk like white people. That gets you more acceptance than we do as darker people. I even had dark men propose to me. One man said, I want to marry you so you can bleach out my children. I'm like, that is no reason to get married. And after you said that, I wouldn't marry you anyway. But, I've never stood on my color. I've advocated for Black people my whole life because once you go to Howard University, they train your mind. They tell you, you're not here just to get educated for you. You're here to help raise the race. It's your job in life to go out and make sure that you battle discrimination and you pull up people behind you. And I've always believed in that. Although colorism, people accuse me because they look at me. I mean, I have some friends from Jamaica. They say, how you light-skinned people are. The brown paper bag test, you can't join this club or come to this party. All that. I mean, colorism is huge. Colorism is huge.
Yeah, unfortunately, it still goes on a lot.
It does.
But some of the most interesting passages in the latter part of your book is when you are in a social setting or sometimes a business setting with a group of other whites, and they don't know that you're not white, and some of the comments that you revealed that they said because they thought that they were talking among a group of whites, and to me, I've always found that very disturbing.
It's heartbreaking, really, to find out how casual racism is among white people. And when they say those things to me and they have no idea who they're talking to, it tells me how much this goes on all the time.
Oh, exactly.
Because why would they say to a stranger this disparaging remark, this hateful thing? They don't know who I am, they don't expect me to object. That tells me how it is, how it goes on when among white conversation.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I remember one time a Saturday Night Live skit that was about that, that the African American person left the scene, and then all the white people started talking about themselves. So yes, and it still goes on, unfortunately. Now, many people with one minority parent and one white parent identify as the minority. Why is that, and how do you identify?
Because of the one-drop rule, it's embedded in people's minds. And one-drop rule, was designed against African Americans and Indians. Mm-hmm. But it applies to all these other people of color, people from India, Hispanics, and so on. Ask me the question again. Let me be sure I answered correctly.
There was many people with one minority parent and one white parent identify as the minority. So, of course, in prior decades, it was the Black people who would take in the mixed race people. You still were part of the family, and white people certainly weren't going to take you as a member of the family. There's a certain comfort in knowing that your community accepts you, although this can be some degrees, but that, you don't have to explain yourself or put on a face or a conversation that's not genuine. And so I think that minorities often mostly identify with the minority. Mixed race people identify with the minority parent. That's where they're comfortable. Yeah, well, yes, I'll agree with that. And in some cases, and I identify as African American. There's no question. Okay. Even though I met my white people, and when my mother was still living and her sister, the two of them, when they got reunited, was thick as thieves.
And we all got together all the time. Even my militant brother was running around with his white cousin, trash talking football games when the two teams played from the different cities. And they got to the point where they would get on the airplane and go to the games together and talk junk the whole time. So, you know, we were all together, and I embraced the truth of my white heritage. However, I do identify as African American.
Okay, I understand that. Now we have got our first question. I got a couple of questions in our chat box, and the first one is from Joyce. And what she says is, do you think things have really changed? We see a lot more interracial couples today, but have attitudes really changed? It appears to be accepted on the surface, but I wonder, my son married an Asian woman and has been married for 24 years. I have family members say to me that they think it's better if people stick to their own race.
Well, I think that it's a big change, and people have discrimination scars where they have come back to their community where they have been comforted and understood. So going beyond your group is something people don't understand too well, and worry is going to somehow be a problem. And I don't know how Joyce feels about her daughter-in-law, but I have a white son-in-law. And I want my daughter to be happy. That's my main thing. Pick somebody that you love, that you feel comfortable raising children with. And if you're happy about it, I'm going to be happy about it too. Not my marriage, not my life, your choice. And I think that more families are beginning to understand it that way, because it's kind of hard to find many people who don't know somebody mixed. A kid in their child's class, somebody in the pew at church, somebody at work, somebody that's the clerk at the grocery store. Okay, you've seen it. You've seen it. Now, race is one of the biggest problems America has. It's called the original sin. We're not going to get over it very soon. Everybody is not going to sing Kumbaya about mixed race, and we know this. When will they? I don't know. I don't know. And
Well,
I agree that, of course, so there's always the mask and then the truth. But people don't tell you what they really think. They may act out. That's plain, but you don't always know what the others' feelings are. But the fact that the census is showing us this growth in mixed race tells us something is changing.
Well, you most definitely. But do you think, and that there's always going to be members of a family who feel like that the blood should remain pure?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jews want their kids to marry Jews, right?
Yes.
Italians want their kids to marry Italians. Hispanics want their kids to marry Hispanics. Black people want their kids to marry Black people. Catholics want their kids to marry Catholics. It's the group mentality that this is who we are. And if you change up and get outside of the group, it's going to be some kind of trouble. This is all, everybody has that thought. And so even though, you have a mixed family, a mixed couple or family within your bigger family, that doesn't mean everybody's going to like it.
Well, that's true. They normally don't. There's always usually some naysayers in the family. Now, our next question is from Yvonne, who wanted to know, did you self-publish or were you published with a publishing company?
I was fortunate enough to get a publishing company to bring my book out. And I was very happy about that because when you self-publish, all of the distribution of the book, all of the marketing of the book and so forth is on you. But if you get a traditional publisher, they warehouse the books and ship them out to the bookstores and Amazon, and they make all those arrangements for you. And there was somebody at the publishing house who contacted newspapers and radio stations to let them know about the book. And so I had reviews in several major publications, and I got appearances on NPR and so on. And so I was really, really, really grateful that I got picked up.
You got some great reviews of the book. I saw a lot of the reviews. It reviewed very well.
Thank
Now,
you.
after talking to other writers, did you have to submit your work through an agent, or were you able to do it on your own?
I did submit it through an agent. And the thing was, like I told you all, I had been in business for years and years. And when I got ready to write this book, I had to go back to school to learn how to write. And at the writing school, they told us, if you submit your manuscript to publishers, they may not even read it because they want to know that somebody in between you and them has read your book and is recommending it. That's the agent. So it's, you have to write to these various agents, present your material, explain what it's all about, and why you think it should be published by a publishing house. And every agent that gets your query, is not going to accept you. So you really have to work hard to get an agent. I met mine at a literary conference. So in these kinds of conferences, which are all for writers, you will often have an opportunity to book an appointment with agents where you can sit down and show them your work and explain it and let them question you and so forth. And that was the process that got me an agent.
Okay. Yeah, because I had heard from quite a few authors that they got nowhere with trying to, as you said, you can send them to the publishers, but unsolicited manuscripts are just normally, one lady told me that they just throw them in the garbage.
They have what they call a slush pile. And I'll just give you this little bit of training that was passed on to me. Every agent has a specialty. One only does cookbooks. One only does children's books. One only does horror books. You got to be really careful who you approach, because if you're sending them a memoir like I have, they're saying, well, what am I going to do with this? That's when it goes straight in the trash. But if you find somebody who has a memoir, I was looking for memoir and multicultural focus. Find me somebody in that camp to submit to. And then I have more of a chance for them to read it. But often they have a lot of assistants in those offices, and the assistants get the first crack at reading the book. And they have certain standards that they're trained to. And if they don't see what they're looking for, then they put it in the trash too.
Oh.
Some of them don't even answer you. You put all this work into it and write all these beautiful explanations and everything, and they don't hear a word.
Okay, I can imagine.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Oh, I know it's not an easy process. If anyone else has any questions, please post them in the chat box. And while I'm waiting to see if any more questions come over, I want to also thank you for including discussion questions at the end of the book. We book club leaders love to have that availability. As a matter of fact, I'm going to add a set of your books to our book club collection.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I've done a number of book clubs, and they've told me that that they've used those questions. I love to talk to the book clubs because we haven't had much chance to interchange the folks in the audience, but I love to hear what people are thinking, their reactions, their questions.
Well, I will certainly be glad to invite you to any book discussions that we have in our Greensboro Library book clubs. And the one more question we have now is, how can I get a signed copy of your book?
Well, I'll tell you what, as I told you, the book is available on Amazon. You can also buy it from Target or from Barnes and Nobles. You get your book and go to my website. That's eDoloresJohnson.com. Dolores Johnson. That's spelled with an O, not the Southern spelling with an E. D-O-L. eDoloresJohnson.com. You will find on my website author contact. There's a form you can fill out. You write to me and tell me your name, how you want me to make out a signed book plate, and I'll mail it to you. You got to give me your address.
Thank you. I was trying to, my chat box all of a sudden stopped. I was trying to put that in there so people could write it down.
Yes, please do that.
Okay, let me try this. Okay, so that's Dolores.
With an O, D-O-L-O-R-E-S, Johnson.com.
.com.
It's all small letters, no caps.
Okay, yes.
When you're on the website, you can look around. I have different information on there, including some podcasts, videos of some programs I've done. We have an African American museum here in New England. I did a show with them. You can watch that, and you can read the reviews and see the awards. I was given the Outstanding Literary Award by the National Association of Black Journalists this past summer. So you can see all of that on the website.
Yeah, it's a great website. Well, I see I don't have any more questions. You know, I felt like that probably through our interview, there were so many things you revealed that that people might have had questions about, but they were basically answered during that portion. I want to thank you again so much for joining us this evening. This has been really great, and it's been such a pleasure to meet you and to you know, have you become a library program participant. So
It's been my pleasure. I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you for your questions, and Ronald, thank you for your moderation. It was lovely.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And I say, everybody, be sure to read the book if you haven't. You'll really will enjoy it.
Good.
So good night, everyone.
Good night.
This is Joyce. I just wanted to say that I read your book and I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Tell your friends.
I will. And I'm going to go on your website to get the signed book plate for you to send to me.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to that.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
then.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
I work with Joyce.
Okay, good.
Yeah, she's one of the best folks I've ever met.
And I feel
You're lucky you're lucky to have a coworker that you can say that about.
Thank you.
Thank
luck,
you.
Dolores.
Thank you, Ms.
looking forward to
Yvonne.
your book. I'm looking forward to seeing it adapted to a movie.
Well, I hope you call Hollywood and let them know.
Uh-huh.
Oh yes, they would make a great movie. It would make a great
It
movie.
would. I haven't even read it yet, but I already see that it's got what it takes to be a movie.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
I hope so.
I mean, there's so much of everything else out there.
I know it. I mean, you know, one good thing is that not only the publishers, but the movie makers are now more tuned in to the Black story.
Sure.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's sort of like when all of a sudden the publishers realize that we do read and would like to see ourselves reflected in the books, and you know, and so now I'm so pleased that almost every genre of literature is represented by African American writers.
But you know, that was a big hill to climb because those publishing houses are run by whites.
Yes.
The assistants, the editors, the agents, all those people are white. You're getting to have a sprinkling of other people now. But when I first started presenting my book, I had a meeting with one of the big 5 publishers. I'm not going to name them. And the woman had read my material, and I was in one of these meetings, you know, where I'm trying to present my work. And she stopped me and she said to me, "Who do you think is the audience for a book like this?" And I said, "Well, I think it's, you know, for all Americans, because when you talk about interracialism, you're talking about all groups. This is not a book only for Black people." And she said to me, "Well, no." She said, "Interracialism is an unpleasant topic that people won't want to read about. We would not publish this book."
Wow.
Good grief.
So it's brutal out there, folks. And even though they're beginning to pick up these stories, whether they're books or films or what have you, there's a lot of breaking through the ceiling that has to happen.
Mm.
That is so true.
So when I say I was really grateful to get picked up by a major publisher, I mean it, because I also know an Indian writer, so from East India, Indian. And she has a book that became quite a good seller, but she told me that one of her first meetings with the publisher, she was told, "Oh, we had an Indian writer last year. We don't need another one."
The quota system still lives. That's amazing.
We could talk all night and I can tell you more stories, but I think we're out of time.
Well, that's true. Yes, we definitely could talk all night. I know I can always talk. Well, okay, again, thank you and good night, everyone. And I hope to see everybody again soon.
Okay.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And Dolores, if you want to stay on for a second, I did want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Let's see who we got the rest of the folks on. Let's see. Well, okay. I hope I see my sister's phone number, so she was here.
And good night, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Yes, this is Rosalind Platt, and I just want to
Oh,
say,
hey.
I just want to say thank you, and I truly enjoy everything about the book review and everything, and so I am looking forward to trying to get the book. I looked online here at the library to see if it was available. Already checked out, so I will be looking in the future to make sure I do read the book. And you all have a blessed night, and thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Ms.
thank
Platt.
you.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you for joining us.
All right, you're welcome, Ron.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Well,
Is that your sister's phone number?
yes, that's my sister is still there. Well, I mean, I don't know if she's still listening or not. She just may still. The only thing I was going to say is that I usually have a little gift bag I send the authors. So if you wouldn't mind sending me your address, if I can get one out to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll email it to you.
Okay, great. Yes, you're welcome. Because since I don't have any money to pay the authors, which I wish I did, I just like to send a little token of my appreciation.
That's very nice of you. I appreciate it.
Well, I just really appreciate you all participating in these. I mean, I love it when I got a chance to meet with an author, because that's one thing my mother had us learning how to read, and before we went to school, and in fact, the 3 of us work in libraries, and one's a teacher, and we just so to me it's always thrilling, to meet and talk with an author. So.
Well, that's lovely. I mean, I grew up, loving the libraries. When I was a little girl, every Saturday I went down there to get my 6 new books. And I walked down to the main library where they had a big selection. You know, after I got to a certain age, my mother would let me go down there by myself. But I live across the street from the main library in my town. And when I was writing this book, they have 3 floors in that library. It's big, big, beautiful place. They have a research floor, and they have all of these desks equipped, you know, with all the electrical outlets and what have you. And they have a silent area. I wrote most of my book up there at the library.
Oh, wow. Well, that's fantastic.
I would get up in the morning, pack up my stuff, and go over there when it opened. And I had a certain number of hours I would work at the library. I made myself stick to a discipline. That's how I got it done.
Wow.
And there were so many people up there working, because I live between 2 universities. Within 3 miles, I'm with 2 universities. There were so many people up there, authors, professors, PhD students, everybody and their dog was up there working.
Oh, that's exciting.